Welcome to IMRAN STAR Video, or as we call it, ISVi, the collaborative lens on Vancouver, unfiltered, unscripted, and powered by community. We're not just a voice behind the mic, we're a collective of creators, thinkers, storytellers, and city lovers coming together to spotlight the people, places, and energy that make Vancouver what it is. From coast mountain skylines to neon-lit backstreets, we're covering everything from downtown buzz to the untold stories shaping our scene. You'll find us exclusively on YouTube. No algorithms, no filters, just real talk. For behind-the-scenes updates and chaotic brilliance in real time, follow us on TikTok and Instagram. So hit subscribe, drop a comment, and help us grow from 100 to 10,000 and beyond. Because this isn't just our platform, it's yours too. Turn it up, get into it. Let's talk Vancouver. This is ISVi. When most people hear Premier League, they think football, fancy haircuts, and grown men dramatically falling to the ground over mild shin contact. But in BC, our Premier League is way less glamorous and way more likely to impact your rent, your commute, and whether or not that new hospital ever gets built. Because while Vancouver's aesthetic is all glass towers, overpriced sushi, and indie bookstores that double as performance spaces, the real power moves happen 100 kilometers away in Victoria, where BC's premiers make decisions that shape every inch of city life. Yes, you heard that right. The person in charge of a sleepy-looking Parliament building full of questionable carpets and legislative shade has the power to determine whether your bus runs on time, your rent goes up, or your neighborhood gets swallowed by another condo called the Verve at Sea. Every premier, from the 80s austerity dads to the 2220s housing hawks, has left their mark on Vancouver, whether we asked for it or not. Vancouver may think of itself as the cool, rebellious younger sibling of Canadian cities, all protests, bike lanes, and progressive dreams, but it's still deeply at the mercy of whoever's holding the premier's seat like it's a gamer chair from which they casually throttle transit funding and set property taxes. From Bill Bennett's Expo-fueled concrete jungle vision to Gordon Campbell's "Let's sell the future and call it investment" to David Eby's current speed run through housing reform, Vancouver has basically been the Premier's favorite pet project, punching bag, and political PR stunt all rolled into one. You want bike lanes? Better hope the Premier isn't mad about that time we voted down the transit tax. You want affordable housing? Sorry, we already sold that land to an international holding company back in 2006. Oops! This isn't just a list of premiers and their policy portfolios. No, this is a deep dive into how BC's top boss has shaped life in Vancouver, often in ways so wild you'd think it was a satire script written by someone on their third cold brew. It's the story of ambitious mega projects, public outcries, real estate chaos, political scandal, and the occasional, wait, are they actually trying to fix this moment? So grab your compass card if it still works. Check your rent payment status and buckle up, because we're about to unpack how BC's premiers have been shaping your urban experience like it's a SimCity speedrun with unlimited developer credits. Before you ask, no, not the Canucks goalie, and definitely not your uncle who thinks Bitcoin is a personality. We're talking about Bill Bennett, BC's premier from 1975 to 1986, who rolled into office with all the subtlety of a wrecking ball and the swagger of a man who believed in concrete more than compassion. Bill Bennett was the kind of guy who looked at Vancouver and said, "This is nice, but what if it was shinier, louder, and covered in freshly poured cement?" And thus began one of the boldest infrastructure binges in BC history, the political equivalent of a midlife crisis, except instead of buying a motorcycle, he bought Expo 86, BC Place, and an entire transit system. Let's start with the big one. Expo 86, the massive world fair that would turn False Creek from a toxic industrial swamp into a temporary techno-utopia filled with robots, monorails, and foreign dignitaries politely pretending not to notice the smell. Bennett didn't just green-light it, he supercharged it, betting that a 6-month festival with a Soviet space dome and a floating McDonald's would put Vancouver on the map. Spoiler, it did. And then it put half the waterfront into the hands of luxury condo developers. But Bennett's love for big moves didn't stop at global flexing. Enter the SkyTrain. That's right, the sleek automated train you ride today while pretending not to make eye contact with anyone. It was Bennett's brainchild. Built for Expo but sold as the future of transit, the SkyTrain was his answer to congestion, pollution, and BC's crippling fear of buses. Sure, it came with a price tag that made accountants cry, but you can't spell futuristic without fiscally irresponsible, apparently. He also oversaw the construction of BC Place Stadium, Vancouver's giant inflatable sports dome, which at the time was the world's largest marshmallow look-alike. Critics called it excessive, expensive, and unnecessary. But Bill, he just called it visionary, and then probably walked away in slow motion while someone rolled out a fresh budget deficit behind him. But make no mistake, Bennett wasn't just about flashy projects. He was also the king of austerity, deregulation, and union showdowns. Under his social credit government, BC saw massive cuts to social programs, aggressive anti-labor policies, and a general vibe that screamed, if you're poor, try working harder, or building a stadium, I guess. In Vancouver, this meant fewer supports for low-income residents, gutted housing programs, and the early whispers of the affordability crisis we now scream about over brunch. It also meant the city's landscape started shifting from working-class weird to investment-class sterile. So what did Bill Bennett leave behind for Vancouverites? A futuristic transit system that still works, mostly. A World Fair that rebranded the city and then gentrified it into the stratosphere. A legacy of mega projects that made Vancouver look like the future, while quietly steamrolling the present. Bill Bennett was bold, relentless, and allergic to nuance. He helped transform Vancouver, not necessarily for everyone, but definitely for those with hard hats, condos, or corporate interests. After the cement-drenched mega-project-happy reign of Bill Bennett, BC entered its post-infrastructure era, also known as the Let's Try Empathy phase. Enter Mike Harcourt, former Vancouver mayor, urban planning nerd, and the kind of guy who probably knew how many bike racks were on each SkyTrain platform before stepping into the premier's office. Harcourt rolled into power like a chill West Coast dad who drinks fair trade coffee, composts aggressively, and actually reads the city's zoning bylaws for fun. He wasn't here for monorails and international spectacle. He wanted to build community, sustainability, and maybe even fix that whole housing situation before it exploded into a full-blown economic crisis, LOL. And he wasn't just talk. As a former mayor, Harcourt understood Vancouver in ways that made downtown developers mildly nervous and public housing advocates cautiously optimistic. He believed in densification, social services, and making cities work for people, not just for cranes and condo brochures. In many ways, he was Vancouver's urbanist king before being an urbanist was a LinkedIn flex. But just as things started feeling semi-hopeful, in walked the scandal dragon, Bingo Gate. Yes, it sounds like a rejected Netflix true crime series, but it was very real and very dumb. A fundraising scandal involving sketchy bingo revenue torched Harcourt's credibility, even though he wasn't directly involved. Still, in true Canadian fashion, he resigned to take responsibility, proving once again that BC politics is just high-stakes drama wrapped in flannel and guilt. Despite the premature end, Harcourt's influence on Vancouver lingered like incense in a Main Street yoga studio. His commitment to community-based planning and sustainability helped lay the groundwork for the kind of progressive policies that later premiers would either embrace, ignore, or rebrand as their own with fancier fonts. So yes, Harcourt might not have had Bennett's bombastic budget or Clark's media swagger, but he had vibes, vision, and a genuine desire to make Vancouver work for actual humans. And for that, we salute him, even if the whole thing ended with a scandal involving pensioners and a bingo card. If Bill Bennett poured the concrete and Mike Harcourt planted the community gardens, then Gordon Campbell came in with a gold-plated blueprint and said, "Cool story, now tear it down and build condos." If Bill Bennett poured the concrete and Mike Harcourt planted the community gardens, then Gordon Campbell came in with a gold-plated blueprint and said, "Cool story, now tear it down and build condos." Serving as premier for an entire decade, which in BC politics is basically a lifetime, Campbell's reign was part Olympics, part deregulation fever dream, and part real estate cooked dystopia. Let's start with his vibe. Gordon Campbell was the kind of politician who could sell gentrification as urban revitalization and somehow make a tax cut feel like self-care. Polished, business-minded, and definitely the guy you'd find giving keynote speeches at innovation summits while quietly slashing social programs behind the scenes. He ran BC like a corporate CEO, and Vancouver was his favorite flagship brand. And what's a flagship brand without some glorious spectacle? Enter the 2010 Winter Olympics, also known as Vancouver's International Coming Out Party. If that party cost billions, came with militarized security, and evicted low-income people to make room for curling. While the world applauded our ability to fake being cheerful in sub-zero temperatures, Vancouverites got an elevated Canada line, a bunch of Olympic merch still floating around thrift stores, and an even higher cost of living. But Campbell didn't just build legacies, he also dismantled them. His government introduced sweeping cuts to welfare, public education, and social services, hitting the most vulnerable with the energy of someone saying, "Just bootstrap your way out of systemic inequality, bestie." Under his leadership, the downtown east side became more neglected, housing became more unaffordable, and Vancouver's identity slowly pivoted from gritty coastal creativity to Airbnb-friendly investment zone with artisanal soap shops. And yet, to his credit, Campbell did give us Canada's first carbon tax, an environmental flex so shocking it made Alberta blink twice. It was a bold, revenue-neutral tax on fuel aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions. For a premier who was basically BC's poster boy for neoliberalism, this move was like watching your dad suddenly go vegan and nail it. He also aggressively pushed P3s, public-private partnerships, like they were going out of style, which meant your local hospital, bridge, or SkyTrain expansion came with a side of corporate involvement, weird naming rights, and questionable accountability. Let's not forget, this was the era when condo towers became Vancouver's primary export. Under Campbell, zoning rules bent like yoga instructors, developers flourished like rooftop gardens, and suddenly everyone and their cousin was flipping condos like Pokemon cards. But even political juggernauts trip. In 2010, Campbell's shiny neoliberal train slammed into a wall called the Harmonized Sales Tax, HST, a deeply unpopular move that unified British Columbians across class lines in mutual rage. After relentless public backlash, he resigned in 2011, leaving behind a legacy of polished infrastructure, gutted services, and a Vancouver skyline that could moonlight as a corporate screensaver. So what did Campbell give Vancouverites? An Olympics-fueled boost in global recognition and rent. A transit system with sparkle, funded by cuts that stung. A city reimagined as a luxury product instead of a place to actually live. In short, he made Vancouver world-class, just not for the people already living in it. If Gordon Campbell was your business-savvy uncle who ruined Christmas by explaining the stock market at dinner, Christy Clark was the polished, media-trained cousin who showed up late, smiled for every camera, and left before anyone noticed nothing actually got done. Clark entered office with big charisma, bold heels, and the energy of someone who definitely beat you at networking, even if she had no intention of following up.